Where is my sharing? Share screen. Start broadcast. Okay, so in this relativistic quantum mechanics part, we have unfortunately or fortunately only 5 lectures. So we will cover the basic ideas of why relativistic quantum mechanics is there. Of course, why it is there is not a difficult question, because you have relativity, so you must incorporate that in your formalism. But what are the main differences? It's a conceptual level. It's a completely different set of things are going to happen, and we will discuss part of it. Mostly we will talk about the equations of Klein Gordon and Dirac equation. We will see how does that helps you to formulate a consistently relativistic quantum mechanics. And we will do some small calculations like hydrogen atom particle in a box, or scattering most likely we will not do. The in full gear, the relativistic quantum mechanics requires, of course, a setup of QFT, which we'll learn in next semester. So notice that, I mean, of course, you want to, this is a kind of basic introduction I'm going to give you for first 10-15 minutes. And that introduction has, usually I write down that kind of introduction in Piazza, but each time I didn't get time to do that. So let me say that anyway. So in your entire coursework, of course, relativistic quantum mechanics is going to be one of the ultimate frontier. And the main reason is you are now trying to amalgamate two of the most advanced ideas, or not most modern ideas of modern physics, of physics. So, and these ideas are relativity and quantum mechanics. Both are very peculiar. So we are confronting these two peculiar idea at the same time. One of them is telling you object moving faster has a experience time as time passage or time interval is slower, that the moving clock is slower. Or a particle, the quantum mechanics tell you a particle can be at two places at the same time, and they bunch of weird things both of them says. And this both weird set of things, when they come together, another new fresh set of weird thing happens. So that is what we are going to try to internalize and understand. But I can assure you this will be not as weird as the first encounter in quantum mechanics. And the main reason is, although it is weird, by now you are used to that. You are like, have a attitude of like hota hai, like that is that is what will happen. So you will not be as stuck by as in quantum mechanics, but it is still really weird. So also another thing is that in this section we'll kind of take the historical route, and the historical route is very interesting, because by the time quantum mechanics came in 1925, at that time relativity was well established. Special relativity was well established. It came at 1905. So 20 years, the Michelson, Morley and all these experiments are well established, and it was tested up to very high precision. So when quantum mechanics came, they had this thing from the day one that they have to incorporate the fact, which is a well established, highly tested. Both of these quantum mechanics and relativity by now are extremely precisely tested theories. So when quantum mechanics was formulated in 1925, it was there already that you have to incorporate relativity into that. But the initial try, and although the non-relativistic quantum mechanics formalism was set up in 2 years, 1925 to 27, the relativistic one took longer. It took like 7-8 years, because there are many conceptual weirdness. And to tackle this conceptual weirdness, one had to bring, and the main person behind that was Dirac. And it is one more interesting thing to note, that when Dirac did this work on relativistic quantum mechanics in 1928, he was 26-year old. Okay, which is like disgustingly young to do something that profound. And that was the birth of quantum field theory and all that. So around 1920, 30 or 32, 1928, the Dirac equation came, but to make consistency with relativity, have a Schrodinger equation or a wave equation which is a consistent with relativity, but people didn't realize the full importance of that. That took another 4 or 5 years to understand that. And one of the most important thing came out from there, that uh, Dirac realized that spin has a relativistic origin, because in your, when we learned the formalism of quantum mechanics earlier, we brought spin as a external quantity, as a quantity which we put by hand into the wave function. And we said that okay, because we know it phenomenologically from experiment, there is spin and spin half and spin one, so we put that into that. But relativistic quantum mechanics, something else will happen here. If you want to write a relativistic a Schrodinger equation which is relativistic and consistent means it has all the same properties. We will see those same properties are energy has to be always uh, the energy values will make sense. You will see there is a problem of negative energy here, and we'll see how to deal with that. Probability must be conserved and positive everywhere. So that sort of things, when you try to incorporate all that things, spin appears naturally. You need multi-component wave function, otherwise you cannot do it. So that is why one can think that spin has a relativistic origin. It don't need to put it by hand, it is already inbuilt in the theory. So that is one of the main thing came out of the initial years, and that is basically roughly the history. And from then onwards, people realize the need of quantum field theory. I'll give you the motivation for that, but I will not go into that. So also note that another thing about this thing, you might a priori think physically that why I need these two together. You might think, okay, of course, for the purpose of, you can say, okay, underlying nature of the world is Lorentz invariant, and underlying principle of particle is quantum mechanics, so why not them together? But normally, you by relativity, you think a particle is moving near the light speed, like some astronomical object or some from light particle, some elementary particle. And normally an electron moving in an atom is not like, as we discussed earlier based on one question, that it is like 1% of light speed. So is relativity is just a matter of precision. So then if you add the relativistic term in the perturbation theory, you get a very precise answer when you do that. But you will see that it is not just that, it is much more than that. It's a concept completely different way of thinking about the problem. And one of the main thing about this come out of relativity is that relativistic quantum mechanics. So this is one more point you have to be careful about when you use the word relativistic quantum mechanics. I'll come back to that in 2 minutes. I prefer to call it Lorentz invariant quantum mechanics rather than calling it relativistic quantum mechanics, because relativity reminds you of speed of light and a particle at a certain energy, but that is not necessarily the only case where relativistic quantum mechanics is applicable. So I'll come back to that. So the main thing comes out of here is that the particle can born, they have a life and then they die. So particles are not there, any particle is not there forever. So within this framework, the concept is any particle, electron, proton, neutron, anything, they are not like normally you think if a particle is there, they are there. So but you know that in relativity, that particle and mass, they can mass and energy can be converted to each other, and that concept will come into here, and you will see that particles can die and they have a lifetime and all that. Any particle has that. For example, proton has an extremely high lifetime, electron has an extremely high lifetime, so you don't easily see. But there are other particles, other resonant particle which has a short life, and that's why they are very hard to detect. So to speak very heuristically, so let me just state this. So relativistic QM demands a finite lifetime particle, or let me put it more accurately, it naturally leads to a many particle description. Why? So demands a many particle description. So even a discussion of single particle quantum mechanics you need many particles. So the two main idea is, you can think of uncertainty. It's tell you energy can fluctuate even wildly in a short time interval. And relativity tell you that energy and mass are convertible to each other. Okay. So then, so when these two are brought together, it tells you wildly fluctuating energy can transform into new particles. So the essential ground state of relativity is basically particles are popping out and going into vacuum from nowhere. So it's basically an infinite particle description. Okay. So, and that is where you need QFT, which is a description like that. So how can how can be particle born, and that I told you, and how can they die, that is also you will learn eventually by this antiparticle concept and all that. So the main essence of this idea is, if you think of, for example, this electron scattering problem, the kind of problem you are doing for last few weeks, and the particle in a box problem. So all this problem has one character, that no matter what you do to the problem, like bend the potential, shake and do something, or do here and there, it will never change the one thing, that one electron remains one electron. Sorry, excuse me for a second, somebody is knocking at my door. So I'll just come back. Okay, I'm back. So is my screen sharing is there, or is it off?
The screen sharing is off
Okay.
because a call came in.
So okay. So one thing you notice, that no matter what you do in these all these problems you have studied so far, the electron scattering, particle in a box, they have, no matter how you twist the problem, how complicated you do it, like one electron remains one electron, right? So your wave function can get distorted, the probability of getting here can distorted, but if you have a one electron in your problem, multiple electron doesn't show up from anywhere, from nowhere. But that is not the case in relativity. When you incorporate the relativistic quantum mechanics, you will naturally need many particles to describe it. Schrodinger equation cannot deal with that. It's not just a matter of mathematics, you need a completely new way of thinking about the problem. So non-relativistic quantum mechanics breaks down, that's where, and that is where you need this idea of representing particle and fields in equal footing, and that's what leads to same footing, leads to the quantum field theory idea. Now one more final thing before I get into the technicalities is the scale of the problem. So normally you are used to thinking about that relativity means either something in the sky or deep in the under the ground, like either heavenly bodies or subatomic particle. But that is not true. Relativistic quantum mechanics can appear on your tabletop. And the simplest example is, if you take a pencil, you make a scratch it on the surface. Okay, I want the camera also. So let's say you take a pencil, okay, and so they have a pencil app also. What happened? Why is it moving like that? Oh yeah, I get the problem. Let's say you take a pencil and make it like that. Okay, make a very deep like that. Now if you peel off that pencil mark with a scotch tape, like you put a scotch tape and peel up that pencil. So this pencil is graphite, right? You peel it off, you get a one layer of graphite, not one layer but few layers of graphite, or very thin layer of graphite. So that you can dissolve in some chemicals, separate that layer from the scotch tape, put it on a substrate. So this thing is called a graphene system. So it is not only on your in a lab, it is right now on your desk, a graphene. You can in principle make a graphene on your that. So they have, their physics is Lorentz invariant quantum mechanics. And the reason is, I mean, you can show, I mean, the reason is of course much more deeper, which I will not go over right now. But what I'm trying to say, relativistic quantum mechanics is also a human scale physics in that sense. And that is why I don't like to call it relativistic. The word relativistic quantum mechanics reminds you about something close to speed of light. That's why I better prefer to call it Lorentz invariant quantum mechanics. And the main difference come here is the scale of the problem, which is the role of speed of light is taken over by the velocity of electron in such a system, and that sets the scale of the problem, because it's of course much slower than the speed of light, but it can be an invariant quantity too, and that tells you the problem doesn't have any scale and it has its own the physics takes over from there. And this is a general idea, not just graphene, it happens everywhere, which is there is an emergent Lorentz symmetry, which one can think it's as an accidental phenomena. In an emergent Lorentz symmetry at low energy physics. So these points are not usually emphasized in the books, in normal books, but the main thing is that this relativistic quantum mechanics is not, it reappears at various energy scale. It need not to be only a high energy phenomena, it can be a low energy phenomenon also. Okay, so that was all the basic introduction. So now let me get to the subject. So one thing we will mainly will talk about the velocity of particle which is closer to speed of light in this course, but this is the metaphorical light, because the speed of this role can be played by some other thing at a different scale of physics, but here we'll talk about speed of light only. So non-relativistic quantum mechanics is when V is less than C, the energy is P square by 2m. And in relativistic quantum mechanics, we will see that energy is like P square plus m, there is a P square plus m square type time, m square C to the power 4 type of term. And that is how we will deal with that. And the main thing what we will learn is that how to build a theory which will incorporate this, starting with this particular dispersion relation of relativity, and then we will, so basically this relation is E is equal to E square C square plus m square C to the power 4. Yeah. So how do you construct a theory which built into this, and how to make everything consistent? So first we will today start with that basic approach, and we'll see that there are two problems we will encounter, and how to fix that problem by introducing something more. And this something more is, you will see that the spin is incorporated, built into the theory, not to be brought from outside. And also you will see that a particular relativistic equation that is applicable to a particular kind of particle with a specific spin cannot be applied to for a different particle with a different spin, because spin appears in different way. So before I start on that, let me clear a little bit about the notations, because I asked you if you know some basics of relativity, and some notations we will use frequently. So you are familiar with these notations, as I understand. So when I use this x1, x2, x3, so this is basically ct, the 4 coordinate, and mu is just 0, 1, 2, 3. This is the 4 vector. Now we also you also must have learned that if I consider two events in space time, which are differentially apart, so dx0 is again c dt. So we generalize a notion of distance between these 2 points using this notation that ds2 is g mu nu dx mu dx nu, where g mu nu is the metric, because in Euclidean metric is just 1 1 1, but Minkowski metric is 1 0 0 0 0 minus 1 0 0 0 0 minus 1 0 0 0 0 minus 1. Okay, and that tells you basically this quantity is invariant. So this ds2, when I write it, expand it in this form, this is basically c dt square minus dx1 square plus dx2 square plus dx3 square. So you are familiar with this kind of notations, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very
Yes.
good. So then I don't need to go over it too much. The Lorentz transformation, I write it as x prime mu a lambda mu nu x nu, where this is a 4 by 4 matrix, that is gamma minus gamma beta 0 0 minus gamma beta gamma 0 0 0 0 1 0 0 1. Okay, and where gamma is 1 by 1 minus v by c square and beta is v by c.
So what is x dash mu?
The how you load, it's a Lorentz transformation.
Shouldn't it be? Yeah, it just be x mu.
No, I'm going from x
X
to x
dash.
prime.
Oh, you're going. Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, it is just going to a Lorentz transform space. Yeah. So if you apply this Lorentz transformation, so that means you write the ds square, that is equal to ds prime square, which is this is the ds, and this, when I transform everything into x prime using this transformation, this thing remains invariant if I write it in the Minkowski metric. You know these kind of things, right? So ds2 we call it Lorentz invariant. Now this can be positive. So for example, ds2 positive is time like. You also must have done those things. This is space like, which you can identify also from the light cone diagram. And this is light like. Now one more thing is we'll use is this contravariant and covariant. So this is just a crash review of all the things we are going to need immediately, at least within these 5 lectures. So contravariant vector is a quantity which is transformed like a regular vector, and if that is the case, then covariant is its dual space which transform like del del x mu. So then which we refer to as del mu, this is our notation. So we can write the relation between these two as g mu nu x nu. So whenever I write something like that, this summation over mu is implied. So this is the Einstein convention. So when I write this, it actually means this. So this is I'm going to use a lot. Okay, one more thing we know, that this relation between these two things, that x0 is x0 but x1 is minus x1 of this contra and covariant, and this is true for x2 and x3 as well. This because obviously from the metric you know that. Now you can define a scalar or a dot product in this Minkowski space in this contra covariance, which is defined as this kind of inner product, and that is written as this is this G mu nu nu, or the opposite. You can also take it upstairs and these two downstairs. Both the same thing will happen. So one more thing is a Lorentz invariant second order differential operator, or the D'Alembert they call it, no, which use the del square operator. So here it is written as del mu del mu. So that means it is 1 by c square del 2 del t square minus grad square. This is my del operator. And we also know the relativistic mass, which is gamma m, and energy is mrc square, which is gamma mc square. The relativistic energy momentum 4 vector momentum is p mu, just like the space x mu. I also define the p mu, which is E by c p, and p is gamma mv. So from there we know that we can work out the this form, which we know this is the relativistic p mu, which is p mu, and that is basically E by c square minus p square. This is the regular vector.
So
This
the 4 vector p nu equals to E by c comma.
p,
Okay.
yeah, this is the regular p, and this is the 4 vector p. So let me put this p here for that. And this quantity is gamma mc square c square minus gamma mb square m square c square. So these are all familiar notations. Just to quickly review that. And the relativistic energy momentum relation, which I wrote down already, and you also must have learned it very extensively, is this. So this is the one which we'll use extensively. Sorry, E square. And another quantity which we'll use a lot is this px. This is the relativistic p and relativistic x. So that means p mu x nu, as we define the dot product here. Okay. And this is nothing but et minus p dot x, which appears as the phase of a plane wave. If you remember earlier we did that. So we are going to write it often as px in this 4 vector notation. Now starting from here, I can take the v less c limit, and I can show that this is nothing but p square c square plus m square c to the power 4. I take the mc square out, it is 1 by p square m square c square square root, and that is basically mc square plus p square by 2m plus dot dot dot. So if I neglect the higher order term, the kinetic energy of a non-relativistic particle is p square by 2m, that is E minus mc square. This is a constant, so it is basically the Ke of non-relativistic particle. So this is all the thing we need for these 5 lectures. Okay, if you are I mean, I'm sure you are familiar with each of these things, but if you are a little rusty on that, you can just open your relativity book and look it up. And as I said, this book of Reznik It is like a really thin book. Let me see if I have it. No, I don't have it here. So it is like a this thin book, like this thin, not more than that. So it's some, and I suggest you to read it up at some point of time. You get a full view of how the theory was developed and how all those things happen. And one more small side note: the program of incorporating special relativity and quantum mechanics together gives rise to this quantum field theory. And as I said, this natural many particle description is not exclusive to high energy phenomena. It's also true at low energy. And as we have seen already in the example, that if I have a Fermi surface, I can call the excitations which are popping. So I can treat the Fermi surface as a vacuum. And even in a description of metal requires a full gear QFT formalism, because the particles excitations can pop out from that vacuum and disappear in that vacuum, just like in this relativity. So this whole idea was extensively used in high energy and condensed matter and developed a lot. But the amalgamation of general relativity and quantum mechanics is a very difficult problem. That's an ongoing program. There are many issues, and there is no clarity on that. So I just want you to know that as a fact. Even though those are developed long ago, that amalgamation is not yet successful. Okay, so now we will take the program of incorporating relativity. With our first attack on that problem will be the historical approach, which first was proposed by Schrödinger and carried out by Klein-Gordon. So we will learn about this Klein-Gordon equation. So when this first Schrödinger equation was developed, and as I said, that people at that time were aware about the thing that you have to incorporate relativity, because by then relativity was a well-established theory. So immediately afterward, people thought that how can we do that? So the simple-minded approach that was used,
So,
yeah.
so one question out here. So there wasn't any problem that was supposed to be solved just by using incorporating relativity in the QM, right? So that
I didn't get it.
we
Sorry,
have
say that again.
suppose we are doing the normal formalism and then we stumble upon a problem which could be only solved by relativity. So wasn't there a case like that? Or
No,
it's just
so that was so quantum mechanics was discovered because people started noticing anomalous behavior in spectroscopy which cannot be explained from classical mechanics. So then people tried to dig that up and landed on quantum mechanics. That was not historically the case for this part. This part was actually opposite. So here people thought that, okay, since relativity is there, and we have developed a formalism of quantum mechanics that works, that is helping us to understand the spectroscopic experiment up to very high precision. And when you go to higher precision, then it started, one thing anomaly was noticed, but people didn't realize why it is coming. So it was a purely theoretical endeavor to incorporate relativity into quantum mechanics. And as you will see, the first approach was very crude, and that faced conceptual difficulties. So Dirac improved on that, and from purely mathematical argument, Dirac found that there has to be something called antiparticles, and in 1932 antiparticle was discovered. So it was an opposite approach in this case. Okay.
okay. So got it, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll first start with Klein-Gordon equation, which is based on Schrödinger's proposal. Klein and Gordon developed it. So what was Schrödinger's equation can be developed from a very simple-minded approach by saying E is p square by 2m in classical mechanics. And we know that this energy momentum dispersion relation, we have learned earlier that this correspondence principle tells you can go from a classical Hamiltonian to a quantum Hamiltonian by replacing E by the energy operator, which is IH bar del del T, and P by the momentum operator, which is minus IH bar grad. So if I do that, then what happens? So I get a, let's say a phi RT.
So shouldn't that be Hamiltonian? rather than energy. Energy is the value that we get. So the operator is IH cut by dou t. That's
Yeah,
the
this is a this is
Hamiltonian
yeah,
basis.
H is equal to E. They are the same. Hamiltonian operator is basically energy operator, right?
Is there a thing called energy operator? That's my
Yes,
question.
that is Hamiltonian. If you want to
Okay.
say something called energy operator, it is the Hamiltonian.
Okay.
Yeah. S- Okay. So now if I try to do this thing, so I get phi RT e square by 2m phi RT. So when we do that, we arrive at the Schrodinger equation of a free particle. Okay. Now let's try to extend the same program for relativity, which means take this guy. And we can immediately notice the main problem is here a square root, right? So how to take square root of a differential operator? That's a puzzle, mathematical puzzle. So this is p square c square plus m square c to the power 4. So this p is minus ih cut the grad, and this will appear here, and taking square root of that is not so trivial conceptually. So the way out is square both sides. So if I do that, so that's what was attempted, and that led to various kind of difficulties. So if I do that, and now I replace them by operators, h cut square del 2 del t square phi x minus h cut square c square grad square plus m square c to the power 4 phi x. So I land on this equation, which is 1 by c square del t square minus grad square del 2 del t square phi x equal to minus m square c square by h cut square phi x, and this is, as we just introduced, this is the D'Alembert plus m square c square by h cut square phi x equal to 0. So this is my Klein Gordon equation, and this thing is a Lorentz invariant object, as we discussed earlier, which you can show also by using this differential form. So since the operator itself is Lorentz invariant, so this whole KG equation is Lorentz invariant only if this phi is also Lorentz invariant, or this word is called Lorentz scalar. So if you must have learned to extend the definition of scalar and vector or something. So a scalar is something that doesn't transform under a certain set of transformations. It in normal scalar, as we know, we use rotation and all that for it. So in Lorentz invariant, if you apply Lorentz invariant, something doesn't transform, then it remains whatever it was, then you call it a scalar particle. So basically that implies, so then you will see eventually that this is not the only possibility, there are other possibilities there. But when you will see that, then you will realize this KG equation is actually a correct equation to describe the relativistic dynamics of a scalar particle. But then it will lead to some problem which we have to fix. So it describes the dynamics. We will come back to this point. What do I mean by scalar particle? Dynamics of a. So now you will see this another level of peculiarity, which is not very new to you, that even particles can be scalar or vector. We already have seen that because they can be spinors. They have these two components. It's not very new to you. Okay, now this is a wave equation. So we want to find the solution of that. And the solution is e to the power I px. This is the this px, the 4 vector px. This is this px. So this thing proportional to that, because there is a normalization constant. So if I write it accurately, it is e to the power minus iet minus p dot x. I should write minus. It's just a convention where n is the normalization constant. So that is my solution of that. Now if I plug in, because it's a free particle solution, it has this wave equation. So if I plug this thing back into the Kg equation, plug it into Kg equation, like in Schrodinger equation, if we would have done the same thing, we would have gotten the dispersion relation. Here we will also get the dispersion relation, and the dispersion relation we'll get is p square c square plus m square c to the power 4. Because the E is square, you will get, when you take square root, there is both plus and minus sign. Now this is going to be a problem, because we have already discussed earlier that there is no negative energy solutions and what are the problems, the instability problems. But here apparently the energy can be both positive and negative, which is a point to note. That's why I'm writing it separately. So how to interpret that? So that is what we'll do. So the first thing is the dispersion relation. First issue is the dispersion relation. We have to interpret that when we take this simple minded approach. The second issue we'll see is continuity equation. So what is this continuity equation doing? So this is something we did earlier. So if I take this equation, this equation, so let me rewrite this: 1 by c square del 2 del t2. So basically I'm nothing but I'm just breaking down the Kg equation.
So here phi x is acting like the wave function, right?
Yeah. But right now
So-
yeah, it is a wave function. That's a wave solution of the equation. I will come to the interpretation later. That's why I'm a bit careful about using the word wave function. But you can see I started with the same strategy as Schrodinger equation, which means I took the dispersion relation. I wrote down, I just said if this dispersion relation is giving me this dispersion relation must give me this, and based on that I just rearranged the terms, wrote the operator for rearrange the form, wrote it like that. So yes, so and since it's a free particle, it should have a plane wave solution, and that's where I landed here. So yes, it is like the wave function.
So shouldn't the definition be also different?
Why?
Because the wave function definition in Schrodinger picture that we saw, it was the inner product of x and the, yeah, like it was giving the current position of the state function basically. But once we are having this relativistic point of view, the length scale might differ if the
Where
speed
did
is
you
same.
get a length scale? It's a free particle. There is no scale in this
So
problem.
not scales as in like, yeah, how we define the psi in the context of Schrodinger equation. We said that, okay, so this is the position of the state kit at every instant of
This
time,
is
and then
also that. It is the position of the particle. It's the probability amplitude of finding the particle at position x.
so shouldn't that position be changing? Yeah, that position be changing with the, yeah, speed, like the length shortening and the length expansion. Won't that be happening here
No, that's a
with
different
x?
thing. That is a different thing. So we'll come back to that. We'll see that how all these things happens. But this equation is Lorentz invariant, and there is no. I have not yet brought in to incorporate the speed or anything. I'm just saying if I take the dispersion relation, what is the equation I'm getting, and what are the troubles with that?
Okay,
There will be some problems with that, which we'll fix.
okay,
But
so there will be some problems
yes,
regarding that.
so
Okay.
but not regarding what you are saying. So you are trying to say that no, you are mixing up many different things. So it is not the position which changes with speed, it's the interval of between 2 points, right?
Yeah, yes, sir, yes, sir.
So then why are you saying position itself?
Oh, okay, okay, okay,
Okay,
okay. Got it, sir.
now
Got
if you do this transformation in this equation, okay,
it. Uh-huh.
which is x mu is lambda mu nu x nu, right?
Mm-hmm.
This guy is invariant. If you can show that, you check. If that happens, then your everything is fine.
Mm-hmm.
So you will just, sorry, x prime. So you will write down an equation which is like this, which is the D'Alembertian Where is that? D'Alembert in the prime coordinate plus m square c square by h cut square phi x prime, right? And that is the point. So that means you are getting the same equation with the new coordinates after Lorentz transformation, right? Make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Got it, sir.
Yeah. So
Because
that is the thing to be checked. Okay.
okay, okay, okay. Got
If
it.
that happens, then your equation is satisfying what you wanted to achieve. You wanted a Lorentz invariant quantum mechanical wave equation. Right? So that is what you
Okay,
got.
sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. Now from here. So from here, if I multiply by psi star x, and we will get, like, there are 2-3 lines of algebra which I am not going over the entire details. So let me just take the steps. So multiply psi star x on this equation, and then take the step 2 is take, so let me number this equation. So this number equation is equation 1, psi star a times equation 1, and then take conjugate of equation 1 and multiply by phi x, like how you worked out the continuity equation. So when you do that algebra and then subtract one from another, subtract 1 from another, subtract 1 from 2, or vice versa. So what you will get is the following. So let me write down the third step of this algebra. So what you did, you multiply psi star, you wrote one equation. In the next step, you took this equation, conjugate it, multiply by psi, you wrote another equation. So when you subtract them from one another, you will get this. Write in my note. Psi star 1 by c square del 2 phi del t2 minus 1 by c square del 2 phi star del t2 phi minus 5 star cat square phi minus phi cat square phi star equal to 0. Okay, now you can rearrange these terms and it becomes 1 by c del t. This is exactly how you worked out the continuity equation in quantum mechanics 1. That's why I'm not going over all the steps. Minus del phi star del t phi plus grad h cut by 2im phi star grad phi minus grad phi star phi 0. Now this is a familiar form of your continuity equation. So we write it as 1 by c del t rho plus grad j, or in Lorentz invariant notation it is del mu j mu equal to 0, because this is my del mu derivative. So this part, let me change the color. This part is my j0 or rho, and this part is my j vector. Okay. So basically this is my continuity equation, and recall that what this continuity equation actually told us physically. So continuity equation is basically a statement about conservation of probability. So it tells you if the probability of finding a particle at some region increases, it decreases somewhere else and all that, because it's total one particle. It cannot be, if something is more probable to be found there, it is less probable to be found elsewhere. So starting from this KG equation, we found the same continuity equation. So now we will interpret this rho just like in Schrodinger equation as the probability density, this rho, and this J as probability current. Okay. So this density is now like a transformed like a 0th component of J mu, and this component like 1, 2, 3 component of J mu. Now, if you plug in this solution, this particular phi solution, wave equation solution, plug in phi x in e to the power minus et iet minus px. If you plug in this into that, you get rho as 2n square e. So this is a very simple calculation. You just take this guy, take this derivative, write phi, this derivative del phi star del t, again take this conjugate and derivative and subtract it. When you do that, you get rho 2n square e. So that is my probability density of this coming out from this kg equation. And we will see this encounters two major problem. Just 2 more minutes, I'll just outline the problem and then tomorrow I'll take over from there. So the problems of kg equation. The first problem is both positive and negative energy solutions. Okay. Now this negative one, we know this is a problem because in large momentum, that means we can have large negative energy, so the system can be unbounded from below, which we also discussed extensively in last semester. So that such a system cannot be stable. So that means we are saying a relativistic free particle is not stable. So then we can extract an arbitrary amount of energy. See, it also violates actually energy principle, the energy conservation. So it seemingly it is saying that we can extract an arbitrary amount of energy from the system by pushing it into more and more negative energy system, because such a system will always go to the bottomless downwards, and it will continuously emits some energy. So how to deal with that? So now we can say, oh, it always happens. Equation gives two roots. We say, oh no, the negative root is not physical, so we get rid of that. But we cannot do that because this is quantum mechanics. So we want. So if I truncate, I say I will take only the p square c square plus m square c to the power 4. Can we do that? No, we cannot do that. Why? Because the whole energy states, they construct your complete basis state, the completeness, right? You want the completeness also. You cannot, if you throw away half of them, the completeness is gone. And if completeness is gone, there is no superposition principle. You cannot work out. You cannot expand an arbitrary state in this set of states because it's not complete. So we cannot throw away the negative solution either, because that will mess with completeness. So if I take an arbitrary state, I want to be able to write it as ci phi I. Okay. If I throw away half of the phi i's, I cannot do that. So the superposition is messed up. So two things. One is eigenstate. We cannot throw away these, and perturbation may cause a system to jump in a negative energy if you do perturbation theory. But if you have blocked it out artificially, it cannot go there. So that creates another problem. So first point is interpreting negative energy states as unphysical cannot work. So these came and we have to keep them. We have to deal with them somehow. This is the first problem. And the second problem is rho. This rho is 2n square e. Now if e is negative, then probability is also negative. So probability density is negative. These two are the two conceptual problems. So we will see how to deal with that in the next lecture. So that's all.
So if you scroll up,
Yeah.
yeah, not that up. Like that part in X, like the big X equals to Ci
Chi,
phi.
you mean the chi?
Yeah, chi. Yeah. Oh, so that chi. So what is that chi implying?
some arbitrary state which we want to expand in the basis state, right?
Oh, okay, like that.
Yeah. So now imagine you are throwing away half of the states in a complete basis state or some states. Can you write such a completeness? So the superposition is telling you that, right? When you do this Stern-Gerlach, you are saying this arbitrary spin is a superposition of plus z and minus z. Now you consistently throwing away the minus z, then there is no superposition, right? It is always plus z.
Okay, sir.
So that you cannot do. You cannot truncate or throw away saying, oh, that is what we do. You get two roots. You say one root is unphysical. You cannot do that here. So we have to learn how to deal with that. That's what we will learn in next lecture.
Okay, sir. And one more question, sir.
Yes.
Sir, if we see the Kg equation, the Kg equation is basically double derivative of time and the double derivative with position, right? But in Schrodinger equation, it's just a single derivation of time and double derivation of the
Oops.
position. Why is that? Yeah, what you say? Discontinuity happening.
No, there is
So
no discontinuity. We are just trying to model it with by squaring it, because we don't want to take a square root of a differential operator. That is why
Yes,
we
sir.
got that. But when we'll fix that, that double derivative will also go away. We will duel with that point.
Okay.
That is the
Okay, sir.
Dirac equation, which you must have seen that somewhere. That the double derivative goes away when you take the Dirac equation.
Okay, sir.
But look, this is a very crude, fast approach. It is just a way to say, if I start with the dispersion, if I do backtrack the way we came, replace the classical variables by operators, what equation we get? The equation we get runs into various problems which we'll fix. And these problems appear mainly from the difficulty. Mathematically, it appears from the difficulty of taking square root of a differential operator. So we'll deal with that. We will try to write down something, because we don't want to this square here. The square is the root of all this problem, right? Because the square is giving me this particular negative line, this negative energy. So we want to get rid of that somehow. And you will see, actually we will not be able to get rid of that fully. The negative energy will stay. We have to physically interpret it. And this is the main thing of this. Purely from mathematical consistency, you land on something which is found, which is there in the nature. So that is what we will do in Dirac equation.
Okay, sir.
Okay, more this is office hour now. So more question on previous lecture or this lecture?
Sir?
Yep.
So one thing, so like while we were describing the different dynamic pictures for Heisenberg and things like that, I was just going through that again, and I was thinking of one question. So the question is like this: if we have the Heisenberg's point of view, then we can will that change the definition of what you say, the uncertainty principle somehow? So like how we define the uncertainty principle or perceive the uncertainty
No,
principle?
we define it. You can do the same calculation, because if you take the Heisenberg, see, it is ultimately an operator. You are calculating the how the operator deviates from. You can treat it as the delta x operator, right? The deviation of the uncertainty. So that you
Yes.
can also calculate from uncertainty. It will not change,
Oh no, it
because at
won't
the end
change.
you will take an expectation value and show that the uncertainty is.
Yes, sir. It's like the perception. So the thing is like the uncertainty principle that we do sigma x sigma p greater than equal to h card by 2. So that perception is from Schrodinger equation, right? Like
No,
sigma x.
so nothing will change physically.
X,
That I can assure. The
yeah,
only
yeah,
thing change is how you define things. It's just
X.
two point of view, two reference frames of doing the same thing.
How will it not change? That's my question. Because the thing is that if we see in the Schrodinger's point of view, that sigma x, sigma p are what? The basically the spread of the wave function basically. So like if you
Yeah, so
draw the
you
graph,
take a
but
sigma x and sigma p. You
uh-huh.
No, you sigma s and sigma p is if you take a wave packet, so do a concrete calculation. For example, take a Gaussian wave packet. That is the exercise problem in Griffith. Take a Gaussian wave packet and calculate the delta x operator.
Yeah. That's exactly
Delta x
what we are
square
saying.
expectation value, right?
Yeah, we did that, sir. That's exactly
So
what
that
I'm
you
saying.
do in two different ways. One is Heisenberg way, another is this Schrodinger
Time.
way. There is no
Okay.
reason to get two different results.
So the question that we did was in Schrodinger's with
Yeah, so
like
now you do the same calculation in Heisenberg way, you will get the exactly same result because you are taking at the end an expectation value, and that expectation value is of course will bring you back to some numbers, which is a time dependent number.
Okay, got it. So basically, at the end of the day, it would be still the same.
Yeah,
Like
it
even
is
the
supposed to be.
perception.
Yes, everything should be same. If it is not, then it is a something is big, something is problematic. It is a, you see what is this? It is just shifting your reference frame. It is
Ha.
like whether your reference frame is on the static or reference frame is moving. It is just that.
But
Nothing more.
exactly, sir. That's what I'm saying because the perception is changing, right?
Yeah, but
Your point
that
of view.
that will
So
not change the physical variables,
okay, sir. Got
the
it.
physical relations.
Ha. Okay, sir. Got it.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can do the best way is to check this calculation. Just calculate this exact problem using Heisenberg picture, and you know how to do that. How to calculate the time evolution of an operator. You have to just plug in between the static Heisenberg states, but that operator is now at the time. And when you do that calculation for a Gaussian packet, you will get that to be h cut square by 4. When you take the expectation values and multiply them.
Okay, got it, sir. Thank you.
More questions? If not, we can close the meeting. Okay, so I'm closing the meeting. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, sir.
Yeah, sorry, say that again.
Hello. Yeah, sir. Can we talk now about the project?
Yeah, we can talk now, but send me a separate link because this link anyone can come in, right? Can you send me a separate link in the mail?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.